Hi everybody, time for a story. So I picked a story today that is called a fairy tale. Now you know some very famous fairy tale tellers. Let's have a think. Hans Christian Andersen, he's a very famous fairy tale teller, and the Brothers Grimm, they're really famous as well. Well, this fairy story was originally made up by Hans Christian Andersen, and Lauren Child, the author, she has taken his story, Hans Christian Andersen's story, The Princess and the Pea, and she has developed it. She's used some beautiful language to extend the story. Okay, and we're going to read this story together now, and just look out for the gorgeous language that she uses. Some really wow words. The Princess and the Pea by Hans Christian Andersen and retold by Lauren Child. Once upon a time, many moons ago, of course, there was a king and a queen who had a prince for a son. He was a nice boy and not unpleasant to look at. In fact, handsome. Not too handsome, just handsome enough. Well, look, you can see him there, can't you? He's the one in the middle. His mum and dad, the king and the queen, are on either side of him. One day, when the prince was old enough, his parents decided it was time for him to be married. You know what parents are like, and a prince's parents are no different. The prince didn't object to the idea, but he did make one condition. He wanted to marry for love. He was just that kind of romantic boy. He told his father and his mother, "I would gladly marry tomorrow, but whoever she is, she must be more mesmerizing than the moon, and I must find her more fascinating than all the stars in the sky, and there must be a certain something about her." "What something?" asked the queen. "Just something," replied the prince. Yes, agreed the king. "That's all very lovely, but our condition is that she must be a princess of blue blood and equal in royalness to you." The prince wasn't all that interested in those details, but he knew that he wouldn't get any peace until he agreed. So he did. Now, you may think finding yourself a suitable princess would be easy to do if you are a handsome prince, but you would be wrong. Just how many mesmerizing and fascinating princesses do you imagine there are out there? Well, the king and queen did all the traditional fairy tale things in order that their son might be bowled over by the right girl. They threw a royal ball and invited all the single royal girls in the land. Everyone said yes. Everyone danced. Everyone had a good time. But none of them captured the prince's heart. Oh, can you see, look? He doesn't look very mesmerized by any of them, does he? The prince explained to the king and queen how simply none of them was mesmerizing or fascinating, and none of them, not one of them, had a certain something about them. No, if he couldn't marry for love, then he would rather live alone for all eternity, gazing at all the stars in the night sky. Not only was he romantic, but also a little dramatic. The king and queen said, "The thing is, our dear son, what you are really looking for is a real princess, and a real princess is a rare thing indeed. They do not grow on trees, said the king. No, no, they do not, said the queen. You see, said the king, a real princess is not only mesmerizingly beautiful and fascinatingly interesting, but most important of all, she has manners, said the queen. No one should ever travel without them, said the king. No, never, never go anywhere without your manners, agreed the queen, taking her elbows off the table. The only problem with real princesses, sighed the king, is that they are terribly hard to get hold of, and they almost never read their post. No, indeed, said the queen. Real princesses are very hard to come by. No one has ever found one by looking. You just have to wait for one to come to you. But the prince, who rarely listened to his mother's advice, did the traditional fairy tale find yourself a bride thing of riding far and wide, looking throughout the kingdom for a real princess. He even rode far and wide to other people's kingdoms. But in Far Land, all the girls he met were fascinatingly beautiful, but horribly vain. Can you see? Look at that one. She's got her own little mirror, and she's got a massive mirror on the wall. She just likes looking at herself. And in the kingdom of Shonen, there's the kingdom of Shonen, they were all mesmerizingly clever, but exceedingly dull. So they weren't very interesting to be around. And in Harvonia, there was a certain silliness about them. I mean, you can see his problem, can't you? The prince came back very downcast. He refused to eat anything for supper, not even the very delicious rook pie the royal cook had prepared as a welcome home. He lit a candle in his window and just stood and gazed into the night sky. Not so far away, in a treetop house just over the mountain, there was a girl with the most beautiful black hair that you have ever seen or possibly never seen. She woke up that night to see the moon dancing on her ceiling, and she popped on her favourite pea green dress and glided down the stairs into the garden. I wonder who she is. There she is, look, lying on her bed. Well, she doesn't look very rich, does she? So she can't be a princess. The moonlight shone in such a magical way that she wondered to herself if it could possibly look as beautiful on the other side of the garden wall. So she tripped down the garden path, stepped over a pile of unopened letters, and slipped through the gate where she saw the moon perched on top of the mountain. There she is looking at her garden. She wants to go and look at the moon from another angle, see whether it looks different from a different angle, if it's still shining brightly. Did you notice something then? I think there might be a little clue. It said that she stepped over a pile of unopened letters. Why is it telling us that? I wonder if the moon would be as beautiful up there, she thought out loud. Can you see where she wants to go? I think she wants to go up the tree. And it was. So she continued walking right down the other side of the mountain until she came to the wild woods. Would it be so beautiful in the woods? Considered the girl. And it was, it really was. But just as she came out of the woods, a dark cloud moved across the moon, and suddenly it wasn't. Bother, thought the girl. She could feel a heavy storm brewing. She would never make it back to her own little treehouse in time. There was nothing for it but to walk on. So on she walked. She had not gone more than 7 steps when she felt the first heavy drop of rain falling on her cheek. Bother, thought the girl. Within 3 minutes she was already soaked to the skin, and her 2 shoes were filling with water. The wind was howling, the trees were creaking and crackling as if they might part company with their roots, and the rain pounded down, and the lightning flashed its forked tongue in the blackened sky, and the girl began to tire. It was not umbrella weather. No, an umbrella would have done you no good at all. If it was raining, I would have thought an umbrella would have been very useful. I wonder why it wasn't umbrella weather. Oh, of course. It says there is, that's right, there's a storm howling. And that would of course have caused the umbrella to blow inside out and blow away. Probably would have been no use at all. Have a look in the picture. Can you see? There's a beautiful building in the background with a little light on. I wonder what building that is. I wonder who lives in there. I think I might just catch a terrible cold unless I have the very good fortune to spot a light in a window. Oh, but what is the likelihood of that on this wild, wild night in the middle of nowhere? Said the girl out loud. However, as she made her way round the next corner, that's exactly what she saw. Using her very last drop of energy, she climbed the steep, steep steps to the huge front door. The Queen was woken all of a sudden by a very, very loud knock at the palace door. Being a queen, she sensibly woke her husband, an unusually heavy sleeper, and asked him to go and see who in all the kingdom might be banging on the door at this time of night, for goodness sake. Can you see? Look, there she is, in her bed. Oh wow, her bed's made of wood, look at that. Looks like a big wardrobe. When the king opened the door, what he saw was a dripping wet girl standing, even without a coat, on his doorstep. She had long, raven black hair and skin as pale as ivory and lips as red as rose petals. You know how it is with these fairy tale types. She was, despite the effects of the weather, a real beauty. But she was also shivering cold and looked as if she might collapse at any moment. It's a lovely pea green dress, isn't it? Of course, the king was very polite. He had manners. That's the thing about real kings. Their manners are impeccable. He didn't even mention the large puddle that was forming on his very expensive royal floor. Instead, he told the girl to warm herself by the fire while he called for his wife, who didn't particularly want to get up on such an unreasonable night, but, being a real queen, never ever forgot to be hospitable to strangers. The Queen thought this girl looked special. There was something mesmerizing, something fascinating, something that the Queen could not quite put her finger on. Unlike her husband, she came straight to the point. So, my dear, who are you on such a wild and unruly night? Oh, I'm a princess, and I live in a treehouse on the other side of the mountain. A treehouse? Pondered the king. A princess? Inquired the Queen. What kind of princess? Oh, replied the girl, I am a real princess. I was outside admiring the moon when it started to rain, and then, oh, what with the thunder and lightning, well, when I lost my way and then I saw a light in your window. I do hope you can forgive my waking you at such an hour. The Queen thought, well, she sounds like a real princess. She looks like a real princess, but we'll see. I think the Queen liked her manners, didn't she? The way that the princess asked for the Queen to forgive her for waking her at such a ridiculous hour of the night. So after the girl had finished her elderflower cordial, the Queen ordered a steaming hot bath and supplied her with the softest towels and an exquisite nightgown. Oh, this is far too good for me, said the girl, which of course is exactly the kind of thing a real princess would say. Very humble. While the girl was taking her bath, the Queen had the servants make up the bed in a most unusual fashion. She chose the most fabulous bedchamber with the most beautiful four-poster bed. Then right in the middle of the bed she placed a tiny, tiny pea-green pea from the royal garden. Then on top of the pea she piled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 feather mattresses. And on top of the 12 mattresses she placed the finest linen sheets and the plumpest Siberian goose down feathers. Wow, look at those beautiful pillows full of Siberian goose down. Must be very soft. What a beautiful bed, gasped the girl. Oh, I am sure I will sleep like a real princess in this bed. And up the ladder she climbed. We'll see, thought the Queen. Do you know what the Queen's plan is? That's right. But that night, the poor girl hardly slept a wink. She was tossing and turning all night. Despite her exhaustion, she could not make herself comfortable. Worse still, the next morning she found she was black and blue and rather achy. Do you know what that means, black and blue? Yeah, you know, like when you hurt yourself, you get a bruise. So, for some reason, she was covered in bruises in the morning. That's strange, because the bed sounded very comfortable, didn't it? At daybreak, the Queen knocked on the door with a cup of tea. How did you sleep, my dear? I trust comfortably? Not wanting to be rude, the girl replied, Oh, very well, yes, perfectly. Thank you so much for asking. Aha, thought the Queen. I knew she couldn't be a real princess. But what the Queen was forgetting was that any real princess had such impeccable manners that it would be impossible for her to tell her host, who had gone to all the effort of making her a bed stacked with 12 feather mattresses, that in fact it was the most uncomfortable night that she had ever had in her whole entire life. The Queen, though most disappointed, invited the young guest to have breakfast down in the royal dining room. When the prince saw the girl, his eyes lit up. He thought she was more mesmerizing than the moon, and when she spoke he found her more fascinating than the stars. and there was a certain something about her that caused him to let go of his teacup, which clattered to the floor. Can you see? Look, he's in a state of shock. He's dropped his teacup and smashed on the floor. The princess couldn't help thinking there was something romantic, something dramatic, something strangely charming about his clumsiness, and she bent down to pick up the cup. A real princess will always pick up your teacup if you drop it. Kindness is practically their middle name. But this was not the only reason she did so. There was a light in the prince's dark eyes which reminded her of all the stars in the night sky. It did not escape the queen's notice that as the girl bent down, she let out a cry, something a bit like, ouch. "Whatever is the matter, my dear?" asked the king. "Oh dear, I'm all aches and pains today, and I just don't know why, and I feel so awful when you went to so much effort, and how ungrateful I must seem, and I hope you will forgive me." But there was nothing to forgive, because, as anyone will know, a girl who can turn black and blue when a tiny, tiny pea-green garden pea is placed under 12 feather mattresses must surely be a real princess. The prince, who was not very bothered about the details, simply said, "There's a certain something about you." And the girl smiled and told him her name. And after the moon had risen and set several more times, the prince asked the girl to marry him. That's the thing about real princes. They know all the right questions to ask. And she, being a bright girl, as all real princesses are, knew a real prince when she saw one and said yes. And they were married in a very real fashion, outside, in a garden, where the sky twinkled with stars, and the moon shone down, and everyone had a splendid time. Peas were not served, because, as everyone knows, real princesses are not especially fond of peas. You see the bowl of peas on the table. They weren't served at the wedding. That's good, isn't it? So the reason why I love that, well, I love that book because of the illustrations, because they are very special. Because I don't know if you noticed, but the illustrations, they're actually little models that have been made and then photographed. Isn't that really clever? Those are actual little mattresses, and the drapes, they're actual pieces of material. And then the characters are made out of paper, I think, and drawn. But what I love about that book are all the beautiful words, and if you look at the text, then you can see that some of those words have been highlighted, either by being in bold or by being in a different font or being in italics. So beautiful words. Mesmerizing. Do you know what mesmerizing means? If something is mesmerizing, you can't stop looking at it. It's amazing to you. And fascinating is something that really interests you. So those are some beautiful words that I use there. Try and use some of those words in your literacy. What other lovely words? Howling, creaking, cracking, pounding, flashing. Wow, they're beautiful adjectives, aren't they? The word beautiful is used a lot, and magical as well. Gazed, that's a lovely word. Instead of look, he gazed out of the window. Oh yeah, gorgeous words there. So I hope you enjoyed that retelling of that famous fairy story by Hans Christian Andersen. And if you want to get that book, it's called The Princess and the Pea. It's by Lauren Child, she's the author, and the illustrator, well, actually the person who took the photographs is called Polly Borland, because I think Lauren Child actually made the little models herself. Very clever. Okay, hope you enjoyed that story.